Hello and welcome to the How to Carnivore podcast. I'm your host, Simon Lewis, and you're tuning into the Plant-Free MD series with Dr. Anthony Chaffee. Dr. Chaffee is a surgeon, nutritional researcher, and former pro rugby player. He's been strict carnivore for 3 years and an on and off carnivore for more than 20. Dr. Chaffee looks and feels like a real-life superhero. If losing fat, building muscle, finding focus, and getting the most out of life is important to you, you're going to love the Plant-Free MD series.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode with the Plant-Free MD, Dr. Anthony Chaffee. Today's topic is all about fruit, which is kind of strange for a show that's called How to Carnivore. But in the carnivore community, everybody seems to all of a sudden be talking about fruit. There's a lot of people, including Carnivore Aurelius and the Carnivore MD, Paul Saladino, who are really big into eating meat and organs, but also a lot of fruit. And Dr. Chaffee has spoken a lot about the damaging effects of glucose. So I thought it'd be really interesting to run a few things by him, in particular, some of the arguments that Carnivore Aurelius has put forward for why we should eat fruit, and to get Dr. Chaffee's perspective. So, Dr. Anthony Chaffee, welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much. And fructose in particular, not just glucose.
Fructose.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we can get into that. So to start off with, we're going to do a little bit of a rapid fire. I just read one of Carnivore Aurelius's blogs. To be clear, I love Carnivore Aurelius and he's hilarious on Instagram, but it should be fun to get another perspective on the message that he's putting forward. So the first point that he raised is our eyes have evolved to eat fruit. And I interpreted this as something to do with, he was talking about the way that we can recognize colors. So we can see like a ripe red fruit in a tree. Thoughts, Dr. Chaffee?
That's probably correct. But, the thing is that you don't lose a trait evolutionarily unless there's an evolutionary advantage to losing that trait. We can still move our jaws side to side, but that doesn't mean we can mill grains and fibrous plants, but it didn't benefit us to lose that trait. And so evolution didn't expend the energy or the worry in doing that. So same thing with being able to see colors. Maybe seeing colors gave us an advantage in other ways as well. I mean, it certainly helps our modern lives also. So there may have been other advantages to that, and at least there wasn't enough of an advantage to lose it. However, there are people who are red-green colorblind. Quite a lot of men are red-green colorblind, and this is thought to be because of hunting. And you can see in sort of low light, dawn, dusk times a little better. You can also see the contrast between foliage and like an animal, right? Whereas if you have full color vision, it's harder to sort of pick out shapes in the wild and things like that.
Wow. So it can be an advantage to be less good at seeing colors.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why a lot of carnivores and the hunt predators and things like that is because they don't, they're not seeing a whole bunch of different colors and noise. They can just sort of see there's something there. It's just sort of hiding in the bushes and it stands out a bit more. And so this is thought to be why a lot of people develop red-green color blindness.
That's very interesting.
Yeah. And so, maybe, but, we also had, a long cecum and so forth. And that used to be where we used to pile in fiber and so forth. And we haven't used that in a long time either. That did confer an advantage to shrink that down because it takes a lot of energy to maintain a large gut. And so that shrank. So that's a vestigial organ. Color vision can be thought of as vestigial as well. That conferred a specific advantage at a certain time, but it didn't necessarily confer an advantage after that, but it didn't give us a huge benefit to lose it necessarily, which is why it didn't completely go away. But you see that all over the place in all sorts of different examples of that, where you just don't have you didn't have evolutionary advantage to lose a trait, just like moving your jaw. So that's how I would respond to that.
Okay, yeah, I like that response. I mean, being able to recognize colors and have like a sort of a broad range of colors that we can see is an advantage for lots of things. Like, humans can also do art and build computers and do all sorts of stuff, where I feel like that would also come in handy, not just for recognizing fruit. Anyway, okay, we move on. Number 2, humans like sweet things. It's true. We do like sweet things. Does that mean we're designed to eat fruit?
I mean, people like cocaine too. I don't really see what that has to do with anything. Yeah. So carbohydrates are generally sweet, generally mildly sweet. Glucose is not very sweet. There's lactose that's kind of sweet. To me, it's much more sweet because my sense of taste is very different now that I've just been full carnivore. But fructose is the sweetest of the sugars, the carbohydrates, and it's thought to be evolutionarily that this is so because we don't really know of any fruit or plant that contains fructose that is acutely poisonous to humans, like will kill you that day. So our ancestors who were able to recognize this as a bit of a nice flavor were able to eat something that sort of got them through the lean times. And so this was a quick hit of energy. This is something that they recognized as safe, or at least temporarily safe, and were able to survive. And so that would have conferred a survival benefit, being able to eat some plants when it was necessary to survive. But that doesn't mean that that's optimal for us. That doesn't mean that that's our evolved natural state and of most benefit to us.
Yeah, I think Carnivore really does say that obviously you can survive on just meat and fat. Like he's totally open to that. He just want to make that clear that he's not saying we need fruit, but he's saying it can be a benefit. Okay. All right. Number 3, it's to do with the human gut. And he says that fruit and meat digestion both rely on enzymes rather than fermentation. So I suppose this is sort of contrasting with vegetables that kind of ferment in your gut, or like a cow when they eat grass. Your response?
So what? So I don't know how that really justifies the argument that we're supposed to eat carbohydrates, that this is something that simple sugars or whatever, that this is our natural evolved state. We came from an herbivorous background 8 million years ago or so, and then ate more and more meat. We've been basically full carnivores for the last 2.5-3 million years. But you still have certain traits, and that would confer evolutionary advantage and survival advantage if you are able to eat fruits or starchy things or whatever when you needed to. And this is why we've been such a dominant species. We've been able to habitate all over the world, like literally everywhere from north to south pole. And so, that can give us an advantage to be able to run on these energy sources. But, if you're thinking about optimal, if you're thinking about how we evolved, if you're thinking about what's best for us, you have to think about, people living in snow-covered climes like, the North Pole, the Inuit and so forth, and many other civilizations, and also the ice ages. There were, tens of thousands of years in a span where there was not a single fruit tree or beehive around. They just weren't. And so, vegetation aside, there was certainly no fruit and there was certainly no honey. And so if you're saying that this is what we evolved on, this is something that we have to have, I would say that that's just inherently, verifiably false, because we did not have the access to that for tens of thousands of years. And, the Inuits don't have it at all. And one of the contentions that have been put forward is that lack of carbohydrates or fructose can cause organ dysfunction and even like thyroid dysfunction and so forth.
That's his next point.
Okay, well, we'll get to that one then.
Okay, so the next one is to do with metabolism and thyroid. So eating, this is kind of a realist, eating fruit tells your body you're in a calorie-rich environment, so your metabolism accelerates. Which means that you can burn. I'm not 100% sure what the point is there, but then he also argues that if we're not eating fruit and we're regularly burning the fat that's stored in our bodies, that's stressful. And then by eating fruit,
Is it?
it puts our body in a less stressful situation. So
Is
I
it stressful?
feel like you've got something to say here.
Yeah. Is it really stressful? Is it? I don't know. I think that's going, harkening back to the idea that, this is a fed state and a fasting state, and a fasting state is, putting your body in stress, and this is hard on your body, and this is only supposed to be if you're lost in the desert and you can't eat for a month, and this is a survival mechanism. That's nonsense. This is the primary metabolic state of all animals in the wild. Your fat stores are your gas tank. This is how your body runs. You fill up your gas tank, you run on your gas. All animals in the wild run like that. Animals in the wild, except like hummingbirds and some insects and things like that, they run on fat, and so, they're not running on carbohydrates. Even herbivores, they break down, fiber into, short chain fatty acids, right? So they're all running on this. They're all being able to access their fat stores. They're all running on fat. And so they're all in this stress, horrible state that's boxing their thyroid. Probably not. And then the idea that you're in a high caloric state, you've got an abundance of food and so forth, so you put your body is less stressed. What has more energy and nutrition and calories than fat? Not a single food source. So, carbohydrates, have 4 calories per gram. Fat has 9. Okay. So, I've heard this before, people saying that, well, we must have eaten a lot of honey and so forth because it's such a calorie dense substance. And it's like, density is a specific word. Density, means calories per gram. The densest, caloric source is fat. Carbohydrates are the same caloric density as protein, if you can, by burning it, which is nonsense. I mean, things are, function very differently in your body biochemically. So, those calories don't actually work exactly the same as like the calories from protein or the calories from fat and so forth metabolically. However, if we're just going off those numbers, it's definitionally not, it's calorically dense. Fat absolutely has the most energy per gram. As far as thyroid is concerned, again, look at the Inuits, look at people in the ice ages and so forth. If you had some sort of deficit that caused hypothyroidism, that's a big problem, especially for survival in the wild. Hypothyroidism is a dreadful state to be in. It's very, very harmful. It's very hard to live with. And if you don't have enough, you can die from this. More importantly, when a woman is low thyroid and she's pregnant, that baby becomes severely deformed and misdeveloped. It's something called cretinism. We call people cretins, but that actually is a medical term for this specific developmental delay of congenital hypothyroidism. All the best insults are all old medical terminologies, and cretin is one of them. And so this is a very serious issue. You become very intellectually delayed and impaired and physically impaired as well. And so if you had to have carbohydrates, if you had to have fructose specifically, and you're in an ice age, yeah, well, exactly. Everyone would have been cretins, and they would have just died out. We would not have made it through tens of thousands of years of ice ages. The Inuits would not exist right now because there are no damn fruit and there is no honey. So I don't think that holds water. And I don't think that if you just sort of, look at that from that perspective, and, this is something that, Dr. Saladino says, he likes to look at these things from an evolutionary perspective and so forth. He looks at, the Hadza people.
Looks at the Hadza a lot.
Yeah, which is great. But, he talks about how, they eat honey, when and where they can. Fine. But, it's the males doing that because the males are out hunting. There have been studies looking at this, and the women generally don't eat a lot of honey. Okay. They're generally more health and better health than the men. They generally have better dentition and better, dental health than the men as well. So,
just on the Hadza, when I see Paul Saladino, talk about the Hadza, and he went and visited them, which would have been an amazing experience.
That'd be cool as hell, yeah.
Yeah. But like sort of just next door or near the Hadza, you have the Maasai people, and the Maasai people, as far as I can tell, are possibly one of the most dominant and incredible physically and culturally of all the African groups. and they're tall and lean, and they don't eat any carbohydrates. They just eat blood and milk from their cows.
And meat, and obviously, and meat, obviously, and and so that's the thing, is cherry picking, isn't it? You're looking at the example that
you find the honey tribe.
But also, but within that tribe, there are people that eat more or less honey, and they have differences in health just within that tribe. And then you look at the Maasai, and they're very different as well. They're much more healthy than the Hadza.
That's what I'm trying to say.
On top of that, there's one thing that and again, I preface this by saying I really like and respect Dr. Saladino, and Carnivore Realist is funny as hell. I really do like his stuff, and they both have a lot of really good resources that I encourage people to look at. But I just disagree with them on this point, and that's fine. People can disagree and have discussions about it. Dr. Saladino was talking about different studies that he didn't like, looking at getting your calories from fructose versus glucose, and there were problems. But he wanted a study when he was talking about a debate he had with Dr. Gundry, saying that, okay, well, show me a study showing that fruit is a problem or honey is a problem. Okay, well, just because no one's done that study doesn't mean that doesn't exist. You're trying to prove a negative here. And so he called it reductionist thinking, that you're just saying, well, because there's fructose here, and because in isolation fructose can cause problems, does that mean that honey is a problem? Does that mean that fruit is a problem? And he's saying no, that's bullshit, that's reductionist thinking. Okay, well, that may be, but then why are we talking about lectins? Why are we talking about tannins? Why are we talking about oxalates? Why are we talking about cyanide? Why do we talk about solanine and all these sorts of different plants? These things exist in plants, and that's what all of the carnivore proponents, including Saladino and so forth, rail against. They talk about these things. I've always talked about these things. But that's reductionist, though, isn't it? According to that line of thinking. Well, this has oxalates, so that's that. Well, has there been a study to show that spinach does cause a problem, and the oxalates in the context of the spinach cause a problem? So, maybe that's reductionist, but we are being reductionist in other ways then as well. And I don't think that it's a problem to do that. If there's a harmful substance in a foodstuff, and that harmful substance is getting to your body and causing harm, that's causing harm. I guess his argument would be, maybe in the context of fruit in itself, in the whole food, is less of a problem than just refined sugar, which is true. We know that, we get, fiber and so forth. You get the fiber in the plant. This actually stops the absorption of everything. This is why fiber is really bad for you. It stops the absorption of different nutrients and so forth, including the fructose. So then it goes into your lower gut, and you don't absorb all of it. Fine. Honey's not doing that. You're going to get honey. You're going to get the fructose from honey, and honey has more fructose than high fructose corn syrup. There's going to be other things in there that are beneficial. This is the lifeblood of the bees, right? This is what they eat. And, so it's going to have things in there that is good for animal life, but it's also going to have fructose. And fructose, while maybe it's good for a bee, is not good for us and can cause serious harm. And Dr. Saladino talked about those sorts of studies, or animal model studies, or hypercaloric studies where, maybe this group is eliminating fructose, but they're also reducing calories. I'm sure those studies exist. However, Dr. Lustig has been doing exemplary work and research for well over a decade on this, and he has done, human models, human trials with isocaloric studies, meaning that all they did is swap out the fructose. Calories stayed the same, weight stayed the same. He did not let these kids lose weight. He did not let them eat less calories. And they were eating junk food. They were eating kid food. They were eating, toasty bagels and this, that, and the other, but they were just not eating donuts. You know what I mean? They were not eating fruit. They were still eating junk food. They just were eliminating the fructose. And he was reversing metabolic syndrome. He was reversing fatty liver disease in these kids in like 8 days. Okay. In every single one of these things. And so this actually, this study, met the criteria for causation. in these studies. So, now maybe, Dr. Saladino would say, well, they didn't, have those kids eating fruit and honey. They maybe were eating junk food that contain that, maybe. But, I think that you're getting, I think you're getting a bit particular when you're saying, no, I want this study to be done exactly like this. Well, if you want that study to be done exactly like this, please go and do it. You're a doctor, you've got, I'm sure you can get a grant proposal, I'm sure you can get a grant together and do that. If you really think this is healthy or whatever, do the study. There's a lot of information out there that suggests and shows and even shows causation that fructose is harmful. And we have biochemical evidence. We have biochemistry department at UCSF, showed that fructose metabolizes into the same metabolites as ethanol, and it causes the same damage to your body from those metabolites as ethanol. Okay, so it doesn't do the same things in your body before they're metabolized, but as soon as they're metabolized, they do the exact same things as ethanol does. Okay, gram for gram. Okay, so this is going to cause the same problems as ethanol. Going to cause fatty liver disease, cirrhosis, diabetes, heart disease, even implicated in cancer and Alzheimer's and so forth. So I don't see how you can just say, well, the fructose here doesn't count and is just not going to cause a problem. Okay, well then do a study and prove it, because all the studies right now biochemically show. I mean, first of all, you don't need a randomized control trial when you're to show a biochemical process. That's not how we study that. We're going down and actually seeing how this molecule acts in vivo, and this is what it gets broken down to, and this is the pathways they go through. That's hard science. So it'd be nice if we had all these studies. We don't. If he wants to say that fructose is actually really good for you, if you're eating fruit or if you're eating honey, go ahead and do it. I would say that the fruit thing, if you're eating fiber and so forth with it, you're going to ingest or absorb less fructose. But once that fructose is in your body, I haven't seen any evidence to suggest that that's not going to act as fructose in your body. And he asked for these studies. Okay, where is his study to say that once that fructose is absorbed into your body from honey or fruit, it's not going to act the same way as table sugar? I haven't seen him produce anything like that.
That's the question either. And it's like is a small amount of this fructose, when eaten with whole fruit, so you're getting the fiber as well, is that giving people a net benefit? And I suppose Saladino and Carnivore Aurelius would argue yes, but as you're suggesting, it'd be good to see a study. And
they could do that. I mean, they could say, if they did say, okay, you replace, you're having kids eat the exact same thing, but the fructose they're getting is from, fruit or honey source, as opposed to, some refined sugar, and you try to sort of balance out the other nutrients so there aren't confounding factors. You could do that. And if he wanted to do that, I'm sure he could, but, he's postulating at this point that, there's, that is going to be safe in that context. And he wants other people to, to prove him wrong. It's like, well, no, the burden of proof hangs on you at the moment, because all the studies right now actually suggest that fructose is bad for you. And so if you think that in that certain context, they're good for you, well, then, you need to back that up. You're just saying that the absence of those studies, proves its existence. That does not hold water.
Question for you, Dr. Chafee. SAD, standard American diet, versus carnivore plus fruit. Which one are you choosing?
Well, I mean, sort of carnivore plus fruit, obviously, but it depends on how much fruit.
Okay.
Depends on what kind of fruit. That's sort of a side thing. But like the fruit we have nowadays are not in any way resembling the fruit historically. They're like, if you look at what an original mango was, or mango, like a mango. Mangoes are intensely sweet.
Yeah.
They were not always like that. They had it was mostly seed. It was very fibrous and just sort of dully sweet. Dr. Pran Yuganathan, who we both know, he grew up in Sri Lanka and Africa, and he actually saw like original mangoes, and he was just like, they are nothing like mangoes now. And
Interesting.
Yeah. And so, if you talk about, eating to an ancestrally appropriate diet or similar diet, you're not going to eat mangoes, you're not going to eat apples, you're not going to eat kiwis, you're not going to eat any of the actual fruit that exists today, because they did not exist when we were growing up evolutionarily. Now, honey's honey. Probably, I don't know of any reason to suggest that honey would have been different. But this is not something that we were going to get every day, and this is not something we were going to get at all during the ice ages. It just wasn't.
Okay. Moving on to the fifth reason. To be perfectly honest, this is kind of a bit over my head, but it's to do with mineral balance. And he says, one of the potential issues with only consuming red meat is phosphorus accumulation. Studies show that excess phosphorus increases parathyroid hormone, has pro-inflammatory effects, and can suppress vitamin D activation. Fructose is protective against excess phosphorus and can help deplete levels. Additionally, some studies show that fructose can help with mineral retention like magnesium. Mineral balance. Dr. Chafee, what are your thoughts?
Okay, well, again, if our minerals were going to be all out of balance, we wouldn't be here, because we made it through the ice ages. Inuits still exist. They don't have mineral balances. So again, this is in the Maasai as well. And just you and I who've just been doing this for several years, and there are many long-term carnivores. So I'm going around 10 years now, and literally never felt better. So you're not going to live generationally if you're deficient in any single metric, and so that doesn't really make sense to me from an evolutionary standpoint or just a survival standpoint. We have people that are alive today that live generationally just eating meat. There are no biochemical processes that require fructose. None. Not a single thing in your body requires fructose. There's no such thing as a fructose deficiency. But Carnivore Aurelius would suggest that there is. That if you don't have fructose is going to balance out your minerals and so forth. And without this, you're going to have a deficiency and you're going to have a problem. But you don't. And this isn't what happens. So, Carnivore Aurelius, I think one of the articles I read from him, he was saying that this affects your thyroid health, damages your thyroid, like we mentioned, and that you need to eat fructose in order to do that. Again, there's no such thing as a fructose deficiency. So adding in fructose isn't going to do anything for you from a deficiency standpoint. Thyroid. So he and others, like Dr. Saladino, really like organ meats, and that's fine. I don't have a problem with organ meats. I don't eat them myself. The Inuits don't eat them, and they just give them to their dogs. So they just ate skeletal muscle. And this is something that's well documented and recorded going back, at least 100 years. And so, but it was also well recorded that liver especially has a lot of vitamin A. Certain animals have so much vitamin A that you can die from eating their liver, like a polar bear and so forth, and too much seal liver and so forth, you're going to get into big trouble there. So hypervitaminosis A, that's too much vitamin A to the point of toxicity. This can actually suppress your thyroid stimulating hormone. So this is going to suppress the hormone that stimulates your thyroid to make thyroxine and so forth. So that's going to suppress your thyroid. So you're going to get thyroid issues if you're eating too much vitamin A. And so that could very simply be the problem. We also know that the ingestion of carbohydrates actually makes your vitamin and mineral requirements go up. Okay. So this is completely theoretical, but it's just something I was just sort of tossing around in my head. You're eating a whole bunch of liver and you're getting hypervitaminosis A. That's boxing your thyroid. You start feeling like crap. And maybe this is doing some things to your other organs as well. And then you say, okay, I'm going to incorporate back in carbohydrates. Carbohydrates raises your requirement for vitamin A and other things. And now all of a sudden you're at a new normal, and the too much vitamin A that you're having is actually okay now. That's completely theoretical. I'm not their doctor. I haven't seen any of their labs. I haven't spoken to them specifically about this, but this is something I've sort of knocked around in my head as a potential issue. Either way, I don't think that carbohydrates are essential. And fructose certainly isn't. And biochemically, carbohydrates aren't, because we're making all the carbohydrates we need. I think that was one of the things that Carnivore really said. You have to have glucose to do X, Y, and Z in these pathways. We make glucose, we make glycogen. It's rock solid. It's always at a proper level if you're eating a species appropriate diet. The other argument is, if you're metabolically healthy, it's okay to eat some fructose. Okay. I mean, what are we defining as okay? I don't go by okay. I go by optimal. Is it the right thing? Drinking alcohol every now and then, if you're not an alcoholic and you don't have cirrhosis, is okay. Is that a benefit to you? Probably not. And I would say the same thing with fructose, because fructose causes metabolic syndrome. That was something that Dr. Lustig showed causation of fructose causing metabolic syndrome, and removing it, reversing metabolic syndrome in people in isocaloric studies, in iso weight studies. So they stayed the same weight. They had the same calories, and they weigh themselves every day. They had these kids weigh themselves every day. And if those kids started, lost a pound, they're like, eat more today. They would have them eat more, so they did not want them dropping weight, because they wanted to show that this was independent to weight loss. And so, we have that, we have very strong evidence, very high level evidence showing that fructose causes harm. So I think that there are other explanations for things, the different sorts of observed phenomena, and we don't see that observed phenomena in everyone in the carnivore community. We have a lot of long-term carnivores who have never eaten carbohydrates, don't eat fruit, anything like that, and don't eat a lot of organ meats, and they don't have any problems. I just spoke with Kelly Hogan the other day. She's been an 11-year carnivore, 11 years straight. She hasn't eaten anything from plants in 11 years. So she's been carnivore much longer than both Carnivore Aurelius and Dr. Saladino combined, I would say. And she's doing fine. So something different's happening with them. And I don't think it's, just comparing those two examples, it's not the carbohydrates, because she's not eating carbohydrates. I'm not eating carbohydrates. I'm certainly not eating fructose. And so I think that something else is going on there to cause the specific issues that they've been addressing by eating carbs.
Okay. Interesting. I suppose from their perspective, they're seeing a net benefit incorporating fruit into their diet. If that's working for them, power to them.
They're also saying that you can be deficient in carbohydrates, and you can have a deficit in fructose, because that you will get health issues if you don't incorporate carbohydrates. That's something specific that Dr. Saladino has said, that you have different organ dysfunction, and you don't make hormones properly, and your testosterone goes down, and all these sorts of things. If you don't get enough carbohydrates or fructose and so forth.
But you're making it very clear that they are not a requirement. That is not something that we as humans need. Yeah, we don't need fructose, we don't need carbohydrates.
No, absolutely not. No. And that's just from what I've seen in the literature, and by studying biochemistry, and just in my experience with myself and people that I know, and hundreds of patients and so forth. And there are just thousands and thousands and thousands of people all over the world that have been doing this for many, many years, some of them multiple decades, and they're not seeing the problem that Dr. Saladino
and they're proper strict carnivores. They just meat, salt, water.
Exactly. Yeah, and they're not downing whole bunches of organs and so forth, and they're doing just fine.
Okay. Now the sixth point is kind of along the train of what you were just saying. It's about glycolysis. So if you avoid glucose entirely, it opens you up to problems with glucose metabolism over time. All in all, there is now some evidence I've reviewed that fructose can help with glucose metabolism and actually lower blood sugar.
Well, I'd have to see the studies that he's talking about and the context that they were performed in. Are these being done in carnivore populations and long-term ketogenic populations at the very least, or is this just normal population? Because fructose has been shown to have a lower glycemic index. And this is why when people knew literally nothing about type 2 diabetes, they put all the weight on the glycemic index. And basically, there's assign a number to a food stuff that, you ate this thing and this would correlate with a raise in your blood sugar to a certain degree. And so if you had a higher number in the glycemic index, that means this would raise your blood sugar higher and faster than other things would. So glucose is obviously very high on that because it just goes in and just goes straight into your bloodstream as blood sugar. Fructose is much lower. It's much lower on the glycemic index. Well, that's because it goes to your liver and gets turned into fat. That's not too hard. It also replenishes your liver glycogen. So if you're doing a big marathon or something like that, and you're really just hounding yourself, and you eat some fructose, it'll fill up your glycogen, your liver glycogen, quite quickly, actually. So maybe in certain contexts you could do that, but I actually find that this while it will raise your glycogen, you're also going to box yourself because you're also going to raise your insulin, because fructose by and large comes with glucose, and it will in and of itself raise your blood sugar and insulin anyway. And once your insulin goes up, it completely blocks off your fat storage. So yeah, whoop-de-doo, your liver glycogen went up, and you can use more of that, but you've completely blocked off your entire fat storage, and you have way more energy
stored on your body and fat
than you ever will in your liver glycogen. So I think you're shooting yourself in the foot on that one. Oh God, I lost my train of thought. Where were we going with that?
We're in glycolysis.
Oh yeah. So the glycemic index, right? So we know that fructose has is lower glycemic index than glucose and so forth. So yeah, if you're eating more, fructose containing things, you're not going to have the same spike in blood sugar that you will if you're eating, starch and glucose products. So it may be that that's the study he's looking at, and he's extrapolating way too much out of that than he should. But either way, again, if fructose conferred an advantage, that's one thing. But if fructose was a necessary part of life, that's a completely different thing.
Yeah, to be clear, Carnivore really he's not saying it's a necessary part of life. Yeah, he's acknowledged that you can totally live and thrive. I think for him personally, he sees a net benefit.
I don't really get that then, because he's saying that this confers all these advantages, and especially with a thyroid. I mean, if you're gonna get low thyroid, like you're done. You're in trouble. And long-term, being long-term, ketosis. If that's a problem, then why are the Inuits still here? Why are 66% of all species of animal carnivore? Why are they even alive? Because they're always only eating meat and fat. They're not eating any carbohydrates, and they're not really eating fructose. Really, I don't see too many lions, attacking the apple tree. So, and maybe it's specific to us. This is just a requirement to us. That's fine. There's things like that, but again, that doesn't make sense in the people that don't do that and cannot do that. Because people can argue, well, the Maasai drink milk, or maybe they're just eating more sugar, more honey than you think they are. The Inuits are not. Living traditionally up at the North Pole, there's nothing for them to eat. There's no sea honey that I've ever heard of. I don't think that that you can argue that having a complete absence of fruit and honey is a bad thing if you have these populations who don't have access to it and have never had access to them for their entire lives and generationally done so. So, and I don't really see why it would confer an advantage. Maybe it's an advantage if you're eating a whole bunch of other crap. Maybe, maybe if you're eating carbohydrates and you're eating sugar and you're eating fructose anyway, getting that same isocaloric amount from honey and from
whole fruit.
Yeah, maybe that's better than getting it from a donut. Maybe. I mean, show me a study that says that, though. That'd be nice. But then I don't care anyway, because I don't think that either of those, just because something's better, the lesser of two evils, doesn't mean that it's good, and doesn't mean that it's optimal. I have not seen any study from either of those two showing that fructose consumption is optimal in the population of carnivores.
Well said. Yeah, I think the way that I've been trying to make sense of it in my mind is that the message that yourself and Sean Baker, Kelly Hogan, Strict Carnivores are putting forward is largely about healing people who are unwell. And the way that I see this message landing from Carnivore MD and Carnivore Aurelius is that it's about people who are already healthy or reasonably healthy, and they're looking to eat basically a more whole food diet, which definitely has more mainstream appeal than the message of, hey, you've got diabetes, you've got really bad autoimmune issues, you've got dementia, you really need to get onto an elimination or a carnivore diet. So that's kind of the way that I sort of make sense of it in my mind. I'm not sure if you've thought about it.
But I've seen Dr. Saladino, talk about he was having health issues, and he was on, I forget the show he was on, but he was talking about how he was having health issues, and his testosterone was going down, these different sorts of markers were getting worse, and he was just like, oh, okay, what's going on? He looked into it and said, oh, okay, well, sometimes getting more glucose and this and the other can help this. And he said, okay, more fool me, like I just I made a mistake, I can admit my mistake, and we need carbohydrates. So he actually is saying that you need carbohydrates, and I don't think that that's justifiable, given the Inuits and given the fact that we've been through several ice ages. And just starting there, I don't think that you can go forward from that. And I think there's a lot of other ways of arguing that as well, but I think that's just very conclusive. I don't think you need to go past that. Another thing with sugar and fructose in particular is that it's addictive. It gives a dopamine response to the addiction centers of your brain, just like cocaine, heroin, and methamphetamines. And there are MRI studies. Dr. Lustig talks about these in his various works, in his book and so forth, and his talks, showing MRI studies showing that people who are addicted to sugar and metabolically unhealthy, they kill the same areas of your brain as methamphetamine addicted people, to the same extent as these meth addicts as well. Okay, so this is a devastating drug, and as we know from the biochemical evidence from UCSF, this affects your body in the same way as alcohol. So it's killing your brain and addictive like meth, and it destroys your body like alcohol. Okay, this is one of the worst drugs that exists, and for decades, researchers and scientists and doctors were saying that, and were railing against the opposition research from fraudulently put forward by the sugar companies, which has all been uncovered from the Journal of the American Medical Association. Dr. Lust has written a whole book about it, and other people have written books about it as well, citing original source material from the sugar companies saying, yes, we did this, we paid these guys off to falsify this crap. And people can look at my episode on cholesterol and my debate on cholesterol that I did with the Australian College of Nutritional and Environmental Medicine, if they want to sort of get more details on that. And I have links in there. So people were railing against this stuff for decades and decades and decades, and showing like, hey, look, this stuff is really bad. It does really bad things to yourself. There's a Dr. Yudkin, who was completely discredited after the USDA declared that cholesterol causes heart disease. Everyone was just like, oh, you nut. Teachers weighed in, therefore you must be wrong. He was right, and he wrote a book called Pure White Deadly, story about sugar. Now some people that say that the evidence against fructose is faulty then actually make straw man arguments and say, well, they go back to like the 70s and 60s and even 50s at these studies that were very preliminary, looking at fructose and so forth, and looking at animal models and epidemiological data and so forth, saying, oh, this is really weak stuff. Okay, that's not what I'm referring to. I'm referring to Dr. Lustig's work. I'm referring to the more recent work since 2009 that is very, very, very high level evidence. It's like level 1 evidence, and showing causation in human populations. Okay, and biochemical data sets from the University of San Francisco, University of California, San Francisco, which last time I checked was the number 7 medical research institution in America, which makes it probably top 10 or close to in the world. So this is a very, very serious research institution, and So there's very, very, very high level evidence showing that fructose is a problem. And yeah, okay, if you eat just a little bit of it, is that going to be as bad as if you eat a lot of it? No. If you smoke 2 cigarettes a day, that's better than if you smoke 2 packs. The problem is when you start smoking 2 cigarettes a day, eventually it generally leads to 2 packs a day until you just say, oh, that's it, I'm off of this stuff. So, why start an addiction? Why start something that's not beneficial to your body? Why start something that confers a brief benefit, a moment on the lips, forever on the hips? You remember that saying? That was always funny. But if this is a relationship that we have with drugs, we have an unhealthy relationship with food, and particularly with sugar, that we would with drugs, alcohol, and cigarettes. And there's something that we like. We have a temporary effect that we like, we feel good from smoking, we feel good from drugs or drinking, and we have this nice taste and flavor from food, or we have a nice feeling from sugar because it gives a dopamine response, makes you feel good. That's temporary. Some people will go and do drugs and drink and smoke and so forth because they know it's bad for them, but they're like, it's worth it to me because I like the effect. And that's what we're doing with food as well. We're saying, well, I like the effect, I like the taste, and therefore it's worth it to me to get the health detractions. I just don't think they really realize just how big of a detraction it is on their health. When I found that out, I was like, get that the hell away from me. Even though I like this stuff, I enjoy it. I enjoy drinking. I don't do it because I would rather feel like a superhero 24/7 than feel drunk sometimes. And I certainly rather feel like a superhero than eat something nummy every now and then as well. I mean, who cares? That's not a big sacrifice for me anyway. And so, I think that, when we're talking about optimal nutrition, when we're talking about optimal diets, that's how I look at it. And then you go away from that, you're sort of doing something that causes harm, or if you know enough about it, causes harm, but you want the effect. That's an unhealthy relationship with food. You're treating it like a drug. And so I try to sort of steer away from that. If you want to do that, that's totally fine. I just want them to be clear on the facts as they are available and make their own decision. If people want to eat fruit, go ahead. I mean, if Saladino enjoys fruit and enjoys honey and he feels good and he's getting good workouts and he likes it, more power to him. That's fine. I prefer, being pure because I just really, really like how that feels. And I like how my body responds because of that.
Excellent. Awesome. All right. So some of the key points that you raised was humans don't need carbohydrates, fructose, or glucose from plants to be optimal or to be healthy. So that means that physiologically, biologically, we do not need to eat fruit. If we were to eat fruit, eating the whole fruit is better than drinking the juice, because when you eat the whole fruit, you get the fiber, and then that blocks nutrient absorption and blocks how much fructose you're actually absorbing into your system. Did I get that one right?
Yeah, and you're also just getting a hell of a lot less fructose.
Oh yeah, of course, because you can only eat 2 apples before you're like, I've had enough. But you can.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's probably going to be 10 apples are going to go into a glass of apple juice.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't see too many people eating 10 apples in just one go, or they might drink down 5 glasses of orange juice, or I think actually Carnivore really actually does. And he was talking about in one article that he gets 40% of his calories from orange juice alone. So. So, and he feels better and he likes it, and that's fine, but if he did cocaine every day too, he'd have a lot of energy. He'd feel fantastic, for a time, and then it's going to catch up to him. And I think this will catch up to him too. He's eating a lot of meat. He's not eating a lot of other things. So, he's going to be, cushioned from this a bit, but I think it will catch up to him. I think it will cause him harm, unfortunately. And I hope that he gets away from it before anything too bad happens.
Yeah, me too. And eating a small amount of fruit is obviously going to be better than eating a large amount of fruit. But to your point earlier about sugar being addictive, fruit can be addictive too. So, you can easily eat a giant plate of fruit and then an hour or so later go back again. So you know, to what I was saying before, like I think the carnivore community is really important for people who are unwell, people who are sick. And personally, I think it can be confusing for people if you then say to them, hey, you can get your sugar or your energy spike. You just can't do it through eating, lollies or the crap that you were eating before. You have to, you can actually get it through eating honey and fruit. I think that can kind of contribute or help to fuel that addiction they already have to these sugary foods. So that can be, it can make things even worse.
Yeah, I've actually spoken out about this before. The last time I was on, Dr. Baker's podcast. This is when I first sort of started hearing about these guys saying that fructose was not only okay, but it was good for you and you needed it. And so I did a whole hour with Dr. Baker talking about this, and I did not think that was the case. Since that podcast, I had a lot of people reach out to me and message me on social media and so forth, just basically telling me that in their experience, that what I had said rung true and had been a problem for them, because they said, oh, I can eat honey, I can eat fruit. And so they did. So they started eating it. It started out as a little, and then it was a little more and a little more, and it was a lot more. And they said within 6 months, they were eating pizza and junk food and shit, and they gained all the weight, and they had all their health problems back again. And then they sort of had a wake up moment. For some of them, that was my talk with Dr. Baker, where I was like, look, this stuff is really bad. And they sort of had a come to Jesus moment, going like, oh crap, that's what happened to me. I need to just go back just pure. I can't eat any sugar at all. Some people aren't going to have that problem. Some people don't have that issue with food. I mean, I loved sweets, but I certainly didn't eat a lot of them. And, when I did, it would sort of be at a time, but I almost never ate sweets. And so I didn't have that problem. And obviously exercise, extensively, with my athletic endeavors and so forth, and playing professional sports. But not everybody has that, and a lot of people come to that, like you say, because they're having health issues or weight management issues, and so they've had a very unhealthy relationship with food. They've had these food addictions. They've treated food as drugs, and specifically, we talk about comfort foods. This makes us feel better. That's a drug. You're self-medicating. We have people with different sorts of issues, and they're eating this food because it makes them feel a little better. So, we are really using this stuff in the wrong way. And so for those people in particular, if they start reintroducing fruit and honey, even if they're now in a state of metabolic health, they're going to, be at high risk.
It's like the gateway back to the old habits.
Yeah, exactly. And, again, it is addictive. It's addictive because it is a drug. And so, again, saying that you can drink if you don't have cirrhosis. Yeah, it's less bad for you if you don't have cirrhosis, but this is what gives you cirrhosis. One of the things that gives you cirrhosis, sugar also gives you cirrhosis. So, it's I don't think that's a good thing to recommend people for health. Obviously you can caution them and say, look, if you really want to, just be careful with it. It's going to cause harm. But, if you don't do too much of it, it's not going to cause a huge amount of harm. You can say that, and that's going to be more accurate. But, what people are saying now is you can eat all the fruit and honey that you want. It's not a big deal. And more than that, it's good for you and you have to have it, that it's vital, but it's not. It is not vital. There is no such thing as an essential carbohydrate. These things are not essential. They aren't, you do not need them. And I would argue that you do not want them unless you're starving to death. They will confer a benefit if you're dying and you need it to stave off death. I think that's the only benefit. I think that's the reason that this stuff tastes sweet to us, and that we can eat this in the wild, because people that were able to eat this stuff historically during lean times were the ones that survived. And so, but that's a survival mechanism. That's when you're in a really bad state, that is not optimal. That is not necessary.
Okay. Now, talk to me like I'm 5. You mentioned earlier about the organ consumption and you were talking about how organs like liver are really high in vitamin A and other nutrients. And by consuming a lot of these organs, it can mean that kind of like our base threshold of how much we need increases, and that can sort of be related to requirements for eating carbohydrates. Could you reiterate that point before that you were saying? I might have done a botched job of summarizing it there.
No, that's pretty accurate. Like, well, as I've said before, depending on what you eat, you need a different constellation of nutrients. I talk about some of my blog posts and so forth.
This is a really interesting point, because it just goes to show that there's a diet and nutritional input is not the same for everybody. So, like reading on the back of a pack and comparing that with someone else, as you say, it's contextual. It depends on what else you're putting into your body. So,
it really does. Think about people who drink coffee. This saps your body of magnesium and so forth. So you're going to need more magnesium than other people will. So, that's just a very simple example. But, I talk about this with, vitamin C, and this is something that, people have talked about before, and I have a blog post on it. When you eat carbohydrates, this blocks out vitamin C absorption in your gut, but it also blocks out vitamin C in your systemic system. When your blood sugar goes up, this can suppress your utilization of vitamin C. So you need more vitamin C to get the same results. So this goes across the board. We have negative nutrients and so forth, and different, like tannins bind onto proteins, and different sorts of nutrients and lectins do as well. And so your body's not going to absorb all these things. So you're putting this stuff in your mouth, but it's not actually getting into your body. And then other things are going with it, and they're disrupting your body as well. So you need a very different constellation of nutrients to go in your mouth to actually get them to go in your body and do the job that they're supposed to, depending on what you eat. And so carbohydrates do this as well. So when you're eating carbohydrates, when you're eating these sorts of things, you will need more of certain vitamins and so forth. Now, again, this is as far as the vitamin A and people eating organ meat sort of thing. That's complete supposition. I'm just sort of spitballing there. But these are two phenomenons we are aware of, that you're eating carbohydrates and so forth. This will increase your requirement for certain vitamins and minerals, and organ meat has sometimes too many vitamins. We look at how much organs or how many pounds of liver meat exist to how many hundreds of pounds of skeletal muscle and fat. It's 1 to hundreds. So, you're going to be in a situation in the wild where you hunt an animal and you take it down. Most of what you're eating is going to be skeletal muscle, and you're going to have a bit of liver and some of the offal and so forth. The majority of it's going to be skeletal muscle and fat. And so that's going to self-limit it. But also the Inuits did not eat organs. They didn't eat the liver. They didn't eat these sorts of things. And, even the Hadza and so forth that, Dr. Saladino talked about, they show video of this stuff. They, they pass it around and, they take a little bite and they're so, they're in awe of this sort of thing, because it's very nutritious, but it can be too nutritious. It can cause problems. You can have a problem with too many vitamins, too many minerals and so forth. And so you have all these hunters going around doing this thing, and they each get one bite of the liver. That's very different than, say someone who has access to a grocery store and is just eating, half a pound of liver every single day, which some people are doing because they're hearing this, oh, you need liver, or they're taking supplements and they're eating liver and they're doing these sorts of things. You can definitely run into problems doing that. And so it could be that these people, when they incorporate, different plant material and carbohydrates and sugar back into their diet, this rearranges the amount of vitamins that they require and how they're utilized in their body. And so now their threshold goes up, and they have a higher vitamin requirement. And so now their hypervitaminosis is normal. It could be. It's completely theoretical. It's just something I'm thinking about. But these are phenomena that we are aware of. And this could be what's happening. It does describe, the observed phenomena. It may be completely wrong, but it's something that could be happening, and it is an alternate for the fact that you have or you have a carbohydrate and fructose deficiency, which we know is wrong, because I don't have a carbohydrate or fructose deficiency. The Inuits don't. Generational peoples through the ice ages didn't. So we know that you don't require fructose or exogenous carbohydrates. We know that for a cold frozen fact. So it's something else, and that, and how I explain with organ meat and carbohydrates is a plausible explanation for that. And I would be interested to see if they just stopped eating organ meat, would their problems go away? I would bet that it would.
A very interesting theory. So it's sort of like somebody does carnivore and then they start incorporating a lot of organ meat, particularly liver. Then they get, did you say hypervitaminosis?
Yeah. Hypervitaminosis just means you have a toxic level of vitamins,
which is becoming toxic. But then you start incorporating some carbohydrates in the form of fruit, which means that the rate of vitamins that your body's absorbing goes down. So then consuming all these organs doesn't seem like, or doesn't do the same sort of damage that it maybe was before when you didn't have the fruit.
Well, it could potentially reduce your absorption of it, but also increase your requirement of it, and reduce your body's utilization of it in your in vivo. So it could do a number of different things. The end result being that you need more vitamin A than you would otherwise, And if you're getting more vitamin A, and that was, heretofore causing a problem, that may now just be normalized. Potentially. Again, this is it's purely just spitballing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I do not see these problems in my patients or myself or my friends or my family who've been long-term carnivore and have absolutely no carbohydrates or fructose in their bodies.
Not to mention the hundreds, if not thousands, of case studies that Sean Baker has collected through Rivera.
Probably tens of thousands.
Tens of thousands. Yeah. It's a lot. And none of them are sort of reaching out for fruit because they're really unwell on carnivore.
And the Inuits.
And the Inuits.
Just never forget the Inuits. Never forget the ice ages. This is fundamental. And this is something that, maybe if Dr. Saladino sort of looked at it from that point of view, he might agree with, because he does talk about this. He likes to come from an evolutionary background, first principles, and so forth. And that's an example of that fundamentally we evolved during the ice times, and we existed during several iterations of ice ages, and we have people still today living in the Arctic North, or the Arctic tundra, and where they don't have access to these sorts of plant materials. And if you go far enough north, they're on ice drifts and things like that.
Yeah, there's no bees there.
No, it's not even any grass. There's just no vegetation.
Yeah, I mean your example, okay, the Inuits, it's pretty concrete. But even reading like Weston A. Price's literature, when he talks about the native diets, he's not talking about honey. I don't even know if I remember him mentioning honey. Maybe he does. But I think the amount of honey and fruit that these guys are postulating that native groups were eating, I really think that's been exaggerated. As you said before, it's like a fallback nutrition in an emergency sort of situation.
And it's certainly not 40% of your calories a day
in orange juice. I mean, I don't know how many native groups had abundant modern oranges, and
how long their teeth lasted. I mean, just no. That's I don't think that's in any way, shape, or form representative of the available data. And I mean, just look at the stable isotope studies and so forth. If these guys were getting 40% of their calories from glucose and sugar and so forth, we'd see that, and we don't. And we saw you did stable isotope studies with the mummies in Egypt. It's thought that there are more mummies buried around Egypt than there are people alive today. Everyone was mummified. It wasn't just the royalty, and so it was just everyone. That's just how they buried the dead. And and preserve the dead. And so they looked at, pharaohs and so forth, and they found, they had, evidence of heart disease and arthritis and tooth decay, probably because they were rich and they ate all this fat. Well, actually, they had all the, peasant stock and so forth, all also had the exact same degree of heart disease, obesity, arthritis, and tooth decay. And even their statues displayed this when they had men with gynecomastia and pot bellies and so forth. And they found that from the stable isotope study, these guys were eating a lot of wheat. That was their staple diet, a lot of grain. And that the royalty, the nobility were probably had more access to it, were eating more of it, but they were all eating it. They were all eating grains, and they all had the same diseases. And according to the stable isotope studies that they did, they found that everyone was eating the same thing, and they were getting these problems from eating plants and so forth. So, we would have seen that, if we looked at, prehistoric man, and they were getting an abundance of their calories from, plant sources or honey, we would see that in these studies. And that's very hard science. Maybe there's a, they can dispute that and for one reason or another, but at the moment, that's the best information that we have. That's as hard as we get.
To counter that, I think Saladino and Aurelius would say, these sort of ripped images or statues or remnants of our ancestors, they'd say, they were eating fruit and meat and fat.
Well, the ones like the Greek gods and things like that, maybe. You can get ripped either way, and again, by the time we had statues and so forth, this was,
there's a bit of exaggeration happening.
Well, it could be, but it's also the dawn of civilization, and they would have had agriculture at that point. And so, I'm sure that they were eating that stuff, but they were also eating a lot of meat and milk and so forth. This was a very important staple. Anyone who studied, ancient Greece and Rome would know this. But sure, they would have had sort of other things as well, but really seasonally, and generally just the wealthy, aristocratic sort of class would have access to these things more often, but again, seasonally. But either way, you can't really argue with the ice ages. Like they are, they're pretty unmoving. And so, again, with, the Inuits and so forth, they live way up north. There's no plants, there's no honey, there's no fruit. And so if this was a vital, necessary, essential nutrient, they would all have died out. They would not exist. And they do exist, and we exist, and we made it through the ice times. To be here and just to talk about it is hard proof that you don't need fruit and glucose and carbohydrates and sugar. You do not. You just don't. And I would argue that they harm you, and for many, many reasons.
Excellent. All right. I think that's a good way to finish things.
Sounds good.
Yeah, Dr. Chafee, that was fantastic. Maybe we'll get a response from Dr. Saladino and Carnivore Aurelius, which would be really interesting to see.
Well, it'd be interesting.
100% welcome it.
Yeah. Well, they're both really, smart people, and they're both very well versed in various studies. And so this is exactly what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to have, reasonable people coming together with differences of opinion, and you discuss it and debate it, and then you sort of, just talk about it, and then maybe you both leave going, well, we'll just disagree. But then other times, you come to an agreement and go like, oh crap, I never really thought about it that way. And then at least, people can look at this and sort of decide for themselves, what they think is right for them. And that's really all it's about, is just, giving people enough information so that they can make decisions for their own life and try to do what's right for them.
I think that's really well said. Even in 2022, we can have, a debate, a conversation where, two different sides are presented, and, it's amicable. It's just difference of opinion.
Yeah. It used to be such a normal thing. You had classes in high school and things like that. You just go back and you just have public debates, and people would talk about these things. This wasn't this murderous political,
emotional.
Where you're just trying to go for each other's throats, and it's all negative campaigning and so forth. You don't need that.
Yeah.
That's a very well, I mean, people have been doing it forever, but it's not as beneficial, and it's certainly not as civil. And so, yeah, we just hopefully that's not dead. I don't think that it is, but
it'll come back. Everything's cyclical. It kind of feels like it's dead for now in the mainstream, but fast forward 20 years.
Yeah. Well, you do see some things. I talk to people and they they're quite combative at first, and then you just calmly just talk to them and make your points, make your cases, and a lot of them will just kind of go, oh crap, yeah, I really didn't think of it like that. As long as you don't just bark back at each other, then obviously if someone's yelling at you, you're not really going to pay attention to what they're yelling. And so and vice versa. But if you can just sort of just keep it calm, then you can have a pleasant discourse and just display your arguments and so forth, and it still works. I've seen it, and hopefully continue.
Awesome. All right, well, thanks, mate. Appreciate it today.
Yeah, thank you, man. Good to see you.